December 20th, 1941, 08:12 hours near Kunming, Yunnan Province, China. Cold air knifes across the mountaintops as sunlight breaks over the valley. Below, a column of Japanese Ki-21 Sally bombers drones steadily toward the city of Kunming, their silver fuselages glinting like knives in the morning light. The people below hear the ominous thunder long before they see the shapes. High above the bombers, a lone P-40 Warhawk lurks among scattered clouds. Inside the cockpit, flight leader Charles Chuck Older wipes frost from the inside of his canopy. He squints downward, tightening his oxygen mask. The worn leather of his flight jacket creaks as he shifts. He nudges his radio. Tiger 1 to Blue Flight, we've got customers. Static crackles back, then a calm, steady voice answers. Copy Tiger 1, Blue Flight is diving. Older grins. Below him, 5 more P-40s roll forward, dropping from altitude like a pack of hunting cats. Their noses are painted with the now famous shark's teeth, white triangles, blood-red gums, and a snarling grin of death. These are the Flying Tigers, America's covert answer to Japanese aggression in Asia. Except officially they don't exist. A mission that isn't in any book. 5 months earlier, every pilot in this formation had been a civilian, at least on paper. They came from the U.S. Army Air Corps, the Navy, and the Marine Corps. Many resigned their commissions, risking prison for desertion, all to join an unmarked, unofficial unit known as the American Volunteer Group, the AVG, a secret squadron funded by the Chinese government, led by a retired U.S. general the White House pretended not to know, flying obsolete P-40s in a forgotten corner of Asia. They wore no American insignia, they flew under a Chinese flag, and they were paid by the kill. But today, they are all China has between survival and destruction. The ambush. Older pushes his P-40 into a steep dive. The airframe howls, engine screaming at the edge of its limits. His gloved hand tightens around the control stick. He whispers, "Hold together, sweetheart, just a little more." The bombers loom larger. Japanese gunners open fire, long bursts of tracers whipping past the canopy. Older stays on course. He aims for the lead Ki-21. At 150 yards, he fires. The P-40's 50 caliber Brownings roar in unison. Shells hammer into the bomber's wing root. Fuel ignites. The engine erupts into flame. The bomber shears left, trailing smoke, then disintegrates in mid-air. Older pulls up hard as debris flashes past his cockpit. Behind him, more P-40s slash into the formation. Captain Greg Pappy Boyington sends a bomber spiraling into the valley. Pilot Robert R.T. Smith tears into another with a full deflection shot. Inside the Japanese formation, panic spreads. They expected scattered Chinese biplanes, not aggressive American hunters with armor-plated aircraft and 50 caliber teeth. Into the swarm. But the Japanese aren't alone. A swarm of Ki-43 Oscar fighters burst through the clouds above. Fast, agile, and deadly in the hands of veteran pilots, the Oscars dive toward the P-40s. Older spots them instantly. Blue Flight, bandits at your 10 o'clock. Smith replies sharply. We see them, mixing it up. The sky erupts into chaos. Oscars slash through the P-40s with unbelievable agility, banking so tightly they seem to defy physics. The P-40 Warhawks are tougher but heavier, losing turn fights almost instantly. O'Malley curses into his radio. These little bastards can out-turn us. Boyington answers with his trademark growl. Then don't turn, dive, and hit 'em like a hammer. Older banks sharply, making himself a harder target. An Oscar streaks past, guns flashing, bullets rip across his left wingtip. He flips upside down, drops into a diving loop, and lands on the Oscar's tail. The Japanese pilot sees him, too late. Older fires. The Oscar bursts into fragments, wood, fabric, and fire scattering in the wind. Victory, at a price. One by one, the Oscars break off. The remaining Ki-21 bombers jettison their bombs in panic, scattering them uselessly across empty fields. Kunming is saved. But the sky is not silent. One P-40 limps away trailing smoke, Lieutenant George Burgard hit in the engine. He bails out just before his Warhawk explodes against a ridge. Older circles, heart pounding, watching the chute blossom below. Hang on, George. Hang on. The rest of the squadron forms up behind him, battered but victorious. They've survived their first major combat, the first time American pilots have shot down Japanese aircraft in the war. Except officially, America isn't at war yet. The world will not hear about today. Newspapers will not print their names. Washington will deny all involvement. But the men of the AVG know the truth. They are fighting a war that has already begun. July 1941, Rangoon, Burma. 14:55 hours. The air shimmers with heat as the Rangoon docks creak under the weight of cargo crates, fuel drums, and a handful of newly arrived P-40 Warhawks, still coated in American shipping grease. The smell of salt water mixes with the thick scent of oil and rubber. A cluster of American men stand on the pier, their uniforms unmarked, their duffel bags slung over their shoulders. Some smoke, some stare at the horizon, some wonder what the hell they've just signed up for. A tall, broad-shouldered man with a wiry crew cut steps forward. His voice is gravelly, commanding, unmistakably military even without the uniform. Claire Chennault, retired U.S. Army Air Corps captain, aviation visionary, the architect of America's secret air war in China. He looks them over with a cold, evaluative gaze. Welcome to the American Volunteer Group. If you're here to get rich, you're in the wrong place. If you're here to stop the Japanese, you're home. A few pilots chuckle. Most don't. They've heard the rumors. They've seen the news from China. Burning cities, massacred civilians, an outnumbered Chinese Air Force struggling to stay alive.
Chennault continues.
You'll be paid per kill. You'll be flying P-40s that the U.S. Army didn't want. And you'll be doing it against some of the finest pilots Japan has ever produced. He pauses, letting the weight of the words settle. If you want to leave, do it now. No one moves. The secret deal. Weeks earlier, in a quiet office at the Chinese embassy in Washington, a covert agreement had been signed. U.S. President Franklin Roosevelt never publicly approved it, but he didn't stop it either. China, desperate and bleeding, would hire American pilots as civilians. The U.S. would permit military personnel to resign, and American-built aircraft would somehow be diverted to China. Everything about it was unofficial. Everything about it was bold. Everything about it was deniable. But if it worked, China might stand a chance. A ragtag brotherhood. Back on the docks, the men gather around their newly assigned aircraft. The P-40s are tough birds. All-steel construction, self-sealing fuel tanks, and rugged Allison engines. But they're also heavy, slower at altitude than Japan's nimble fighters, and unforgiving to rookies. Pilot Eric Schilling, one of the more experienced flyers, runs a hand along the fuselage. She's ugly, he mutters, but she'll kill anything in a dive. Boyington snorts. Then we just don't climb. Ever. Laughter breaks the tension. Nearby, mechanics unload crates filled with tools, spare parts, and manuals, many stamped U.S. Army property, do not remove. Chennault pretends not to notice. Training under fire. Toungoo Airfield, Burma, August 1941. Dust clouds swirl as the P-40s throttle down on the rough airstrip. Sweat drips from the pilots' faces as they climb out of their cockpits into the blistering Burmese heat. Chennault stands before them with a clipboard. Gentlemen, listen carefully. The Japanese aren't flying scrap. They're flying Ki-27s and Ki-43s, light, fast, ridiculously agile. He taps the clipboard. If you try to turn with them, you die. He sketches a simple diagram in the dirt with his boot. Boom and zoom, hit fast, hit hard, dive away, climb, and repeat. It becomes doctrine overnight. Clashing tempers. At night, the men gather in makeshift barracks, sharing whiskey, telling stories, and sometimes shouting each other down. Boyington drinks too much. Older takes everything too seriously. Smith jokes constantly. Some gamble, some grumble, some write letters home that they'll never send. They are misfits. They are troublemakers. They are the exact kind of men who volunteer for an illegal war. But over months of training and hardship, they become something else. A family, a squadron, a legend waiting to be born. The first warning. One sweltering afternoon, Chennault walks into the operations hut with a telegram. His brow is furrowed, his voice is lower than usual. Intelligence says the Japanese are massing aircraft in Indochina. 90 bombers, 60 fighters. The room goes silent. A pilot mutters, "Hell of a welcome party." Chennault folds the telegram. They're coming, and we're the only ones standing between them and China. The flying tigers stare at each other, suddenly aware that the training is over. The next time they take off, it will be war. A war America doesn't admit exists. A war China cannot afford to lose. They grab their gear. They head to their planes. Tomorrow, the sky will burn. December 23rd, 1941. 09:11 hours, Rangoon, Burma. The heat is already suffocating as the sun climbs above the Irrawaddy Delta. At Mingaladon Airfield, shimmering waves of baked air rise from the runway. Mechanics in grease-stained shorts scramble between fuel trucks, tool chests, and rows of shark-mouthed P-40s. The radio inside the operations hut suddenly erupts with frantic Burmese voices. A radar operator shouts, "Raid incoming, bearing 032, strength large." Chennault pushes through the doorway, eyes narrowing. The operator swallows. "Sir, At least 60 bombers, and maybe 50 fighters. For a heartbeat, the room falls silent. Then Chennault mutters, "All right, boys, this is what we've been training for." He grabs the phone and bellows across the airfield. "Scramble, scramble every ship that can fly." The war comes to Rangoon. Pilots sprint from the mess tent, knocking over chairs and spilling half-drunk mugs of tea. Older and Boyington reach their P-40s first, throwing themselves into their cockpits as ground crews yank chocks away. Engines roar to life, one after another, their deep growls filling the air like a pack of waking lions. Older keys his mic. "Tiger leader rolling." He shoves the throttle forward. The Warhawk lunges down the runway, wheels lifting free of Earth as dust whips behind him. One by one, a dozen P-40s claw into the sky. At 12,000 feet, they level off as seen and see them. A giant wedge of Chi-21 Sally bombers thunders in formation, glinting in the sun. Above them drift dozens of Ki-43 Oscars, weaving like silver hornets across the blue. Rangoon is minutes from destruction. Older exhales. "Here we go." The attack. Older slams his throttle forward. The Warhawk shakes, engine screaming as he dives toward the bombers. The squadron follows, a stream of shark-toothed fighters streaking downward like falling steel. Tracer fire erupts from the bomber formation, glowing lines slicing through the air. A gunner's burst rips across Older's canopy. He ducks instinctively. He picks his target, the lead ship, and closes the distance. 300 yards, 200, 150, yeah. He fires. 6 50 caliber guns roar. The bomber's left engine blows apart in a fountain of flames. The massive aircraft rolls, trailing smoke and plummets toward the jungle below. Older pulls up, narrowly missing the wing of another Ki-21. Boyington's counterpunch. Boyington, trailing behind, spots an Oscar diving toward a straggling P-40. The Japanese fighter twists effortlessly, its pilot executing a perfect climbing spiral. Boyington snorts. "Cute trick, try this." He noses down, not chasing but diving away, gathering speed. Then he pulls a sudden vertical climb, using the P-40's brute power to fling himself upward like a missile. He intersects the Oscar at the top of its turn, a split-second firing window. He takes it. Burp. The Oscar's fragile frame shreds instantly. Flames erupt. The pilot bails, his parachute blossoming like a white flower against the sky. The cost of victory, but the Japanese swarm overwhelms. 2 Oscars latch onto Lieutenant Ed Rector's tail, tracing his fuselage with bullets. His P-40 shudders, oil spraying across the canopy. "I'm hit, going down." Older twists his head, scanning. He sees Rector's aircraft trailing thick black smoke, spiraling toward the rice fields outside the city. For a moment, Older's breath catches. Then Rector's canopy blows off, a white parachute bursts open. Older exhales in relief, then jerks the stick as tracers whip past his nose. An Oscar plunges toward him. He dives into cloud cover. Rangoon burns but stands. Below, bombs rain onto Rangoon. Warehouses explode, docks collapse into the river, oil tanks erupt into pillars of black smoke. But the city is not wiped off the map, because the Flying Tigers tore the Japanese formation apart. Half the bombers never reached Rangoon. Of those that did, many dropped their loads early. Some turned back entirely. The airfield is cratered, the city is burning, but Burma is not lost. Not today. Landing on a wounded world. Older's P-40 lands hard on the pitted airstrip, bouncing once before grinding to a stop. He opens the canopy, heat slamming into his face. Boyington taxis in beside him, grinning. "Hell of a first fight, Chuck." Older pulls off his goggles. His face is streaked with sweat, oil, and exhaustion. "And it won't be our last." Smoke rises from Rangoon in the distance. Sirens wail. Civilians run buckets of water between flaming buildings. This is war in Asia, raw, brutal, relentless. And the Flying Tigers are at its center. Tomorrow the Japanese will return. And the AVG will be waiting in the clouds. January 12th, 1942, 07:46 hours, over the Salween Gorge, Burma-China border. The sun rises like molten gold over the jagged cliffs of the Salween Gorge. Mist clings to the river far below, swirling between the canyon walls. Above it, 3 P-40 Warhawks slice through the cold air, their shark-toothed noses glinting in the dawn. In the lead cockpit, R.T. Smith yawns behind his oxygen mask. He hasn't slept in 2 nights, few of them have, but he keeps his hand steady on the throttle. His radio crackles. "Tiger 3 to leader, and I've got movement on the deck." Smith banks left. Below, 6 Japanese Ki-27 Nate fighters skim the ridgeline, weaving low over the treetops. The Nates are searching for transport caravans heading toward the Burma Road, the last lifeline into China. If the Japanese control the skies here, China starves. Smith knows this. Every pilot in the AVG knows this. He clicks his mic. All right, boys, drop tanks and follow me. Metal clanks as the auxiliary fuel tanks disconnect and tumble into the canyon below. Then the Flying Tigers dive. The chase through the canyon. Wind screams across Smith's canopy as he plunges into the gorge. The canyon walls rush past in a blur of rock and shadow. Ahead, the Ki-27s jerk upward in surprise as chase their pilots not expecting Warhawks to drop from the clouds like thunderbolts. Smith grits his teeth. The Nates are fragile but insanely maneuverable. If he gets too close, they'll turn inside him and carve him apart. So he plays it Chennault's way. Dive, hit, climb, repeat. He squeezes the trigger. The 50 calibers erupt. A Nate's wing snaps off instantly, spiraling into the river like a dead leaf. The others scatter, banking sharply along the cliff walls. Behind him, pilot Tom Haywood locks onto another. His P-40 thunders low through the canyon, lower than Smith thinks is safe, before he fires a burst that rips through the Nate's fuselage. The Japanese fighter explodes against the canyon wall, showering rock and flame across the gorge. Smith pulls up, heart pounding. Keep climbing, don't chase the Turners. But one pilot, new and overeager, ignores him. So him. Jack Newkirk dives after a Nate that corkscrews tightly around a rock spire. The P-40 can't follow the turn, not at that speed, not in that terrain. Smith shouts into the radio. Jack, break off, break! Too late. Newkirk's right wing clips the ridge. The P-40 tears open like paper. It cartwheels across the rocks in a burst of flame. Smith watches in horror, helpless, breath caught in his throat, as smoke rises from the shattered wreckage. Jack. But the fight isn't over. The remaining Nates regroup, climbing fast. Smith wipes his eyes and shoves the throttle forward. Tigers, finish it. And they do. When the last Nate falls burning into the gorge, the valley becomes silent again, except for the roar of 3 surviving P-40s climbing back toward China. Smith doesn't speak for the rest of the flight. Neither does Haywood. War has a way of making legends. It also has a way of taking them away. The people they fight for. Later that afternoon, Smith and his wingmen land on a rough airstrip near the Burma Road. Dozens of Chinese laborers look up from their trucks and mules and wave wildly, cheering in Mandarin, Burmese, and whatever broken English they know. They bring the pilots rice, peanuts, thermoses of hot tea. Children run up to touch the shark-mouth paint on the P-40s. Old men bow deeply. Smith steps out of his cockpit, sweat dripping from his hair. A Chinese officer approaches, salutes, and says in accented English, "You save convoy, you save China today." Smith nods politely, but the words hit him like a stone, because Newkirk didn't live to hear them. Nightfall at Kunming. That night, the Flying Tigers gather in their tin-roofed barracks in Kunming. Oil lanterns cast yellow light across the room as pilots sit on bunks, cleaning guns, rolling cigarettes, or staring silently at the floor. Boyington slams a bottle of rum onto the table. "Here's to Jack," he mutters gruffly. "He died killing the enemy, not a bad way to go." Smith doesn't drink, he just nods. Chennault steps into the room. Every conversation stops instantly. He stands in silence for a moment, hat under his arm. Jack Newkirk was one of the finest pilots I ever trained. He fought like a tiger and died like one. He looks them over, each face tired, streaked with grime, but still proud. But understand this, Japan feared him, and they fear all of you. Keep flying, keep fighting, keep them afraid. He leaves without another word. The barracks stays quiet long after he's gone. The war expands. The next morning, the Tigers receive devastating news. Singapore has fallen, the Philippines are collapsing, Japanese forces are advancing everywhere. China is now more isolated than ever. Burma is teetering, American aid is months away. The men look at each other, realizing the truth. They are the only Allied pilots fighting Japan on the mainland of Asia. The only shield, the only line, the only hope. And the Japanese know exactly where to find them. February 25th, 1942, 10:03 hours, Lashio region, northern Burma. The Burma Road twists through the mountains like a cracked spine, a lifeline of mud and gravel carved into unforgiving terrain. On this morning, it's choked with dust, diesel fumes, and thousands of Chinese troops marching north with rifles slung over their shoulders. Above the road, the air vibrates with a distant humming. Not trucks, not engines on the ground. Aircraft. Inside a command hut near Lashio, Chennault stands over a map spread across a wooden table. Sweat clings to his brow despite the cold mountain air. A Burmese messenger bursts through the door. General Chennault, Japanese bombers, many. Chennault looks up sharply. Direction? South, toward the convoys. Chennault steps outside, staring into the sky. Dark specks emerge along the horizon, then dozens more. Ki-48 Lily light bombers, Ki-43 Oscars, a full strike package. Chennault mutters, "They're trying to cut the road. If they do, China suffocates." He grabs the radio handset. Scramble Kunming, scramble Loiwing, all flights intercept, this is the big one. Scramble at Loiwing. At Loiwing Airfield, mechanics sprint between rows of P-40s. Pilots bolt from the mess hall. Smith, Haywood, Older, Boyington, men who look like they slept in their clothes, pull on flight jackets and helmets as they run. A mechanic yanks open the side door of Older's cockpit. "Fuel tanks topped, guns loaded." Older climbs in, tightening his harness. "Then get out of the way." The P-40's propeller spins to life with a throaty roar. Dust explodes across the runway as 8 fighters leap into the air. The high-altitude gamble. At 17,000 feet, clouds drift like pale ghosts. The P-40s push their engines hard, higher than their Allison engines like to climb. Smith wipes frost from his goggles. "Altitude's killing power," he mutters, "but Chennault swears they'll never expect us to hit from above." Boyington grunts through the radio. "I swear this engine's about to pop a lung." Then the bombers appear. A tight formation of Ki-48s droning steadily toward the Burma Road, loaded with explosives that could cripple the supply arteries feeding all of China's armies. Smith's heart pounds. There they are, Tigers. Let's ruin their whole day. The dive. The P-40s roll over and drop from the sky. Gravity rips at their harnesses. Wind screams across their wings. Engines strain against the dive. Smith lines up the lead Lily bomber. The bombers spot them too late. Gunners open up with frantic bursts, tracers streaking through the sky, bright white and red lines slicing upward. Smith fires. His 50s shred the Lily's cockpit canopy. The bomber's nose dips violently, then the entire aircraft erupts in a boiling fireball. The formation begins to break apart. Older dives after another, raking its engines. Haywood hits a third straight through the fuselage. Boyington, always aggressive, goes for the escorts, firing a burst that sends an Oscar tumbling in flames. The Japanese formation dissolves into chaos. Japan strikes back, but the Oscars regroup quickly. 2 lock onto Haywood's tail, firing long bursts that chew into his left wing. He yanks the stick hard right, barely crossing over a ridge. "I'm hit! Control's sluggish!" Smith swings behind one of the Oscars and pulls the trigger. The fragile fighter explodes in a spray of fabric and wood. The second Oscar stays on Haywood. Smith angles in, but before he can take the shot, Older bursts upward from below, guns blazing. The Oscar disintegrates into the mountainside. Haywood's P-40 limps away, smoking. He's alive. For now. The road holds. Below them, Chinese truck convoys rumble along the Burma Road, drivers looking up at the dogfight raging above. Bombs fall from one crippled Japanese bomber, but they miss the road by hundreds of meters, exploding harmlessly into a hillside. The road is intact. China's supply lifeline is preserved. The flying tigers scream across the sky, tearing into the last bomber until it spirals downward in flames. The Japanese retreat. Aftermath. The AVG regroups on a remote mountain plateau serving as a makeshift airstrip. Pilots jump down from their cockpits, sweating, shaking, emotionally wrung out. Mechanics rush to Haywood's plane. A fuel tank is shredded, half a wing is missing fabric, bullet holes pepper the fuselage. Haywood grins anyway. "Almost had me, boys, but not quite." Smith slaps his shoulder. "Next round's on you." Chennault's verdict. That evening, Chennault walks the line of battered P-40s as lanterns flicker in the twilight. He runs his hand along a bullet-ridden wing. He looks at his pilots, exhausted, stained with sweat and oil, but alive. "You held the line today," he says quietly. "You kept China breathing." He looks toward the dark mountains. "But the Japanese aren't done yet. They'll come again. Harder." The pilots nod. They know. Tomorrow, the sky will burn again.